His family disowned him for being worthless, they didn't know he'd inherited their entire family fortune. The opulent grand ballroom of the Sterling estate, a testament to centuries of inherited wealth, shimmered under the crystal chandeliers. Every surface gleamed, every piece of art whispered tales of immense fortune, from the priceless Renaissance tapestries adorning the walls to the shimmering antique porcelain vases that dotted the gilded tables, each a silent guardian of generations of prosperity. Yet, an icy tension permeated the air, thick enough to crack the most delicate of those ancestral treasures. A peculiar hush had fallen over the assembly, a weighty silence that clung to the velvet draperies and resonated within the polished marble floors. Alistair Sterling, his impeccably tailored suit hugging a frame that had known little hardship, adjusted his designer cufflinks with an air of practiced nonchalance, a gesture that bespoke a profound, almost hereditary, sense of entitlement. Beside him, his sister Bronwyn, her silk gown rustling with every minute shift, clutched a delicate champagne flute, its crystal rim tracing nervous patterns against her trembling lip. Her eyes darted anxiously towards the ornate double doors at the far end of the room, doors that seemed to hold the very breath of their future. The arrival of Mr. Henderson, the family lawyer, a gaunt man with a perpetually somber expression, usually heralded either a cause for grand celebration or, more often in recent times, a reckoning. For the matriarch, Octavia Sterling, observing from a hidden vantage point, the silence was a symphony of anticipation, a prelude to the grand unveiling of truth. Alistair leaned in, his sneer barely veiled by a forced, almost pained smile. His whispered words carried just enough venom to reach Bronwyn's ear. Finally. I thought he'd never arrive. And honestly, this charade has gone on long enough. This endless waiting, it's simply barbaric. Bronwyn nodded, her gaze still fixed on the imposing doors, a flicker of impatience crossing her elegant features. Indeed. Grandmother Octavia always did have a flair for the dramatic, even in her supposed twilight. Though, truly, feigning a terminal illness, wasting precious family resources, and then parading around a supposed long-lost relative in such a state, it's simply beyond the pale. An absolute embarrassment to the Sterling name. The whispers among our peers have been unbearable. She thought of the pitying glances, the thinly veiled amusement in their social circle. The Sterling reputation was being sullied by this bizarre, drawn-out performance. Mr. Henderson, seemingly oblivious to their private grievances, cleared his throat, his voice cutting through the fragile silence like a razor, each syllable a precisely honed edge. Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered here today at the behest of Mrs. Octavia Sterling. She has an announcement of profound significance to make. His words hung in the air, weighted with an unspoken premonition. Just as he finished, the grand doors swung open with a slow, deliberate creak that echoed ominously through the hushed hall. It revealed not the frail, disheveled figure Alistair and Bronwyn had come to associate with the poor relative their grandmother had inexplicably taken under her wing, nor the almost spectral presence of the ailing matriarch they'd been led to believe was on her deathbed. Instead, standing poised on the threshold, radiating an aura of unwavering power and undeniable authority, was Octavia Sterling herself. She was not the stooped, grey figure they had recently mocked and dismissed. Her silver hair was meticulously coiffed, shimmering under the crystal light like spun moonlight. Her posture was ramrod straight, defying her 78 years, a testament to an inner steel that had not rusted with age. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, swept across the room, lingering on Alistair and Bronwyn with an intensity that made their carefully constructed composure begin to crack, revealing the fear beneath. Her gown, a deep emerald silk that seemed to absorb and reflect the light, was understated yet undeniably luxurious, a stark contrast to the threadbare garments of the relative they had so recently scorned. A heavy, antique sapphire pendant, a true Sterling heirloom that had graced the necks of generations of matriarchs, rested at her throat, a silent, glittering proclamation of her identity, her unwavering dominion. Alistair's jaw went slack, his champagne flute slipping from his fingers to shatter silently on the plush carpet, the sound somehow muted by the collective shock. Bronwyn gasped, a choked sound lost in the collective murmur that rippled through the room, a confused symphony of disbelief. Confusion, then dawning horror, painted itself across their faces, erasing the arrogant certainty that had defined them moments before. Octavia took a single, slow step into the room, her presence filling the space, dominating every corner. Her voice, clear and resonant, echoed through the stunned silence, each word a hammer blow. "The game, my dear grandchildren, is over." Alastair, recovering slightly, managed a strained laugh, though it held no humor, only a desperate, brittle edge. "Grandmother? What is the meaning of this? This is a very strange joke. You're supposed to be, well, you know." He gestured vaguely, his mind scrambling to reconcile the powerful woman before him with the image of frailty he had clung to, the image that had promised him freedom and endless wealth. Bronwyn, equally flustered, forced a saccharine smile, her carefully sculpted charm failing her. "Oh, grandmother, you do love to keep us on our toes. But truly, we've been so worried about your health. We sent so many well wishes." And that, to understand the profound shift in Octavia Sterling's demeanor, one had to delve into the very fabric of her existence, into the tapestry of a life meticulously woven with dedication and purpose. She was not merely a matriarch, she was the living embodiment of sterling gems, an empire built on exquisite antique jewelry, rare gemstones, and a reputation for unparalleled craftsmanship and unwavering integrity. For over a century, the Sterling name had been synonymous with beauty, value, and, more importantly, a deep respect for the history and artistry embedded in each piece they curated. From the age of 25, Octavia had personally overseen the company's growth for 5 decades, inheriting not just a colossal fortune, but a philosophy, a creed. True wealth lay not in accumulation, but in appreciation, preservation, and judicious stewardship. Her own grandmother, a woman of fierce intellect and quiet strength, had instilled in her the belief that jewels were not just commodities, but living stories, echoes of the past that must be honored and protected. However, as the years passed, Octavia watched with growing dismay as the values she held so dear seemed to erode within her own lineage, like ancient stone crumbling under the relentless march of time. Her 2 grandchildren, Alastair and Bronwyn, the presumptive heirs to the bulk of the Sterling fortune, were the epitome of this decline. They had been born into a world of unimaginable privilege, a golden cage that had, sadly, stifled any nascent sense of empathy or genuine appreciation. Their lives revolved around superficial pleasures, lavish parties that drained the family coffers, designer clothes worn once and discarded, exotic vacations that blurred into an endless cycle of self-indulgence, and a constant, insatiable hunger for more. The family business, to them, was not a legacy of art and history, a testament to generations of painstaking work, but a mere cash cow, a means to fuel their extravagant lifestyles. They viewed the vast collection of antique jewelry, the very heart of sterling gems, as nothing more than assets to be leveraged, perhaps even sold off for quick profit, rather than treasures to be cherished and protected. Their vision for the future of sterling gems was a stark, almost vulgar, departure from its esteemed past. Octavia recalled countless instances that chipped away at her hope, each a small, sharp shard piercing her heart. There was the time Alastair had openly scoffed at a proposal to invest in restoring a rare 18th-century tiara, a breathtaking piece once owned by European royalty, instead suggesting the funds be diverted to upgrade his private jet, a fleeting luxury against an enduring work of art. Or Bronwyn's casual remark about selling off a significant portion of the Sterling private museum collection, dismissing it as just old junk taking up valuable space that could be better used for an indoor pool complex, a blatant disregard for the irreplaceable history it represented. Their conversations were always laced with cold calculations of market value, potential returns, and how to minimize unnecessary expenditures, a phrase often applied to charitable donations, the well-being of long-serving employees, or the very upkeep of the historical estate itself. These moments, small individually, built into an insurmountable wall of disillusionment. Her most painful realization came during a family dinner, ostensibly to celebrate the company's centennial. It was a grand affair, meant to honor the very foundation of their wealth, but for Octavia, it became a painful testament to its decay. While Octavia spoke passionately about the artisans who had shaped the Sterling legacy, the intricate techniques, the personal stories behind each piece. Alistair was engrossed in his phone, scrolling through luxury real estate listings in Monaco, his attention miles away. Bronwyn, meanwhile, was complaining loudly to a bewildered waiter about the perceived inadequacy of her latest trust fund disbursement, her voice echoing with petulant entitlement. They paid her no mind, their eyes glazing over at any mention of history or philanthropy. It was then, watching their vacant, self-absorbed expressions across the shimmering table, that a chilling certainty settled in Octavia's heart. They were not merely disinterested, they were fundamentally incapable of understanding the true value of what they were poised to inherit. They saw only the gold, never the soul. The thought of her life's work, her ancestors' dedication, falling into such hands was anathema, a betrayal of everything she stood for. She could not simply disinherit them without undeniable cause. It would cause a scandal, invite legal battles that would drag the Sterling name through the mud, and irrevocably tarnish the family's carefully cultivated reputation. But she needed more than a legal loophole, she needed undeniable proof, not just for the courts, but for her own conscience and for the potential successor she knew she had to find, someone worthy of her life's devotion. She needed to see their true colors, stripped bare of the pretense of familial respect and societal expectation. And so, the audacious plan began to form in her brilliant, calculating mind. It was born of desperation, certainly, a last resort for a legacy she cherished more than life itself, but also a deep-seated desire for justice and a pressing need to secure the future of Sterling Gems on a foundation of integrity. She would feign a terminal illness, a debilitating condition that would confine her to her estate, ostensibly in her final days. This would create the necessary distance and allow her to orchestrate the next phase of her elaborate test without suspicion. The core of her scheme involved a complete transformation. She would become someone else entirely, a distant, forgotten relative, impoverished, frail, and utterly inconsequential. This persona would be introduced into the family circle, a crucible designed to test the true character of her heirs. She meticulously planned every detail, the subtle makeup to create the illusion of gauntness and age, the carefully selected, worn clothing that would suggest poverty and neglect, the practiced stoop in her posture, the slight tremor in her hands that hinted at frailty. She even worked with a trusted, discreet doctor, Dr. Albright, a man of impeccable ethics who understood the profound moral stakes, to create falsified medical records, ensuring the terminal illness appeared convincingly real to her unsuspecting family. She would be known simply as Martha, a name utterly devoid of the grandeur and power of Octavia Sterling, a name that would allow her to blend into the shadows, a witness unnoticed. Her objective was crystal clear: to observe. To see how her heirs would treat someone they perceived as utterly worthless, a burden on their potential inheritance, someone who had nothing to offer but a drain on resources. She wanted to see if any spark of genuine compassion, any flicker of true human kindness, remained within them. She knew the risk was immense. She would be vulnerable, exposed to their deepest prejudices and cruelties, the very worst of their entitled natures. But the alternative, leaving her legacy to be squandered by individuals devoid of honor, passion, or integrity, was far more terrifying. Simultaneously, she considered the broader Sterling Gems family, the dedicated employees who had served the company for decades, the unsung heroes who truly understood the spirit of the business. Among them was Elias Thorne, a senior archivist in the Sterling Private Museum. Elias was a quiet, unassuming man, easily overlooked in the grand scheme of the Sterling Empire. He possessed no great wealth, no influential connections, no flashy demeanor. Yet, Octavia had always observed a deep reverence in him, a quiet passion for the history and stories held within the museum's artifacts. He treated every piece, from the humblest locket to the most priceless crown, with the same meticulous care and profound respect. He was, in a way, the antithesis of her grandchildren. He was poor in material possessions, but rich in spirit. He was not part of her direct test of the grandchildren, but her keen eyes had already marked him as a man of uncommon character, a hidden gem within her own organization. His existence, however humble, would provide a crucial benchmark against the avarice and callousness of Alistair and Bronwyn. The stage was set for Octavia's grand, perilous gamble, a final, desperate act to save her legacy. The transformation was complete. Octavia Sterling, the formidable matriarch, had vanished, replaced by Martha, a seemingly distant and impoverished relative, introduced to the family as a woman in dire straits, with a vaguely tragic backstory that her generous granddaughter, Bronwyn, had supposedly taken pity upon. The news of Octavia Sterling's rapidly declining health served as the perfect smokescreen, diverting attention and providing a convenient excuse for Martha's presence. She was seen as a temporary fixture, a minor nuisance to be tolerated until the inevitable, and long-awaited, inheritance was secured. The family had been told Martha was a distant cousin, fallen on hard times, a vague obligation that Octavia, in her fading benevolence, had taken on. This narrative allowed Alastair and Bronwyn to distance themselves emotionally, viewing her as a charity case rather than a legitimate relative. One crisp autumn morning, Martha, hunched and clad in a faded, ill-fitting coat that seemed to absorb all light, found herself in the opulent drawing room of the Sterling mansion, a room she had designed herself decades ago, every curve and color chosen with deliberate intent. Alastair and Bronwyn were sprawled on velvet sofas, iPads in hand, their voices echoing with self-importance as they discussed their plans for the future of Sterling Gems. They were not merely talking about the company, they were dissecting their impending inheritance with the cold precision of surgeons. Honestly, Alastair, Bronwyn declared, gesturing dismissively with her perfectly manicured hand, a flash of diamonds on her slender fingers, the first thing we must do is liquidate some of those archaic assets. All that old silver, those musty tapestries in the museum, they're just capital sitting dormant. Think of the liquidity for our new venture. We could finally buy that villa in Tuscany, and you could get your polo stable. Her voice held a note of genuine excitement, detached from the very things she was discussing. Alastair, scrolling through stock portfolios on his tablet, grunted in agreement, his eyes fixed on the numbers. Precisely. And grandmother, bless her heart, has always been so sentimental about that museum. But frankly, it's a drain. A tax burden more than anything. We could turn it into an exclusive members club. Think of the revenue streams. Private concerts, high-end dinners, far more lucrative than collecting dust. He envisioned a world where ancient artifacts were merely backdrops for modern indulgence. Martha sat silently in a corner armchair, a cup of lukewarm tea in her trembling hands, observing them. Her heart ached with a deep, searing pain, a wound inflicted by their blatant disregard for everything she held sacred. But her resolve hardened, solidifying into an unyielding determination. This was precisely what she had feared, what she had suspected, now laid bare before her. And speaking of drains, Bronwyn continued, her voice dropping slightly, though still perfectly audible in the hushed room, a tone of elegant exasperation, what are we going to do about her? She nodded subtly towards Martha, as if the old woman were a piece of inconvenient furniture, an unsightly stain on the opulent rug. She's still here. And quite frankly, she smells faintly of mothballs and despair. It's becoming utterly tedious. The staff whisper about her, it's a nuisance. Alastair glanced over, a flicker of irritation in his eyes, a ripple disturbing the calm surface of his self-absorption. Indeed. I had hoped she'd have the decency to fade away by now. This pretense of a long-lost cousin needing care is becoming a strain on the household staff, and frankly, an embarrassment when we have guests. Especially with grandmother supposedly so ill. It looks unseemly. People might think we're actually caring for a relative, instead of focusing on the inevitable transition of power. It makes us look weak. Bronwyn shuddered dramatically, a theatrical display of revulsion. Oh, the thought. Perhaps we can arrange for her to be moved to a facility. A quiet one, far away. Out of sight, out of mind. After all, she's not really family, is she? Just some distant, impoverished relation grandmother inexplicably latched onto in her dotage. A final, peculiar whim. Martha watched them, her face impassive, a mask of aged weariness. Not a flicker of recognition, not an ounce of compassion, no hint of the genuine human connection that should exist between relatives. Only calculating disdain, a cold assessment of her as a problem to be solved. It was as though she were invisible, or worse, an overflowing rubbish bin to be disposed of. The bitterness in Octavia's heart solidified into a cold, hard certainty. This was the truth she sought, ugly and undeniable, a devastating confirmation of her deepest fears. The physical discomfort of her disguise paled in comparison to the emotional agony of witnessing such callousness from her own flesh and blood. Later that week, Martha found herself drawn to the Sterling Gems Private Museum, a place she had poured her heart and soul into creating over decades. It was a sanctuary of history, beauty, and quiet contemplation, each artifact a whisper from the past. She moved slowly through the exhibits, her disguised eyes taking in every detail, every artifact she had personally acquired, a silent reunion with her life's work. She paused by a display of intricate Georgian mourning jewelry, a collection she had spent years meticulously building, each piece a miniature work of art holding profound human stories. As she adjusted a tiny, almost imperceptible tilt in one of the display cases, a habit so ingrained it was almost unconscious, a testament to her perfectionism, a quiet voice broke the silence, gentle and respectful. "Ah, a truly exquisite collection, isn't it? The artistry, the emotional depth, it's unparalleled." Martha turned to see Elias Thorne, the senior archivist, standing a respectful distance away. He was a man in his late 50s, his clothes neat but well-worn, his face lined with quiet diligence and an almost scholarly intensity. He held a leather-bound journal and a magnifying glass, clearly absorbed in his work, utterly in his element. He saw Martha not as a burden, not as an inconvenience, but as a fellow admirer of beauty, a kindred spirit drawn to the same quiet marvels. He was unaware of her true identity, of course, but he recognized the subtle, almost reverent way she had just adjusted the case, a detail only a true connoisseur, or the museum's very founder, would notice. "Indeed," Martha replied, her disguised voice a little rougher than her true one, but imbued with a genuine warmth she couldn't suppress. "Each piece tells a story. A life, a love, a loss, a testament to enduring human experience." Elias smiled, a gentle, genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes, radiating an earnestness Octavia rarely encountered. "Precisely. And it's those stories that truly give them value, isn't it? Not just the gold and the diamonds, the market price, but the human lives, the emotions, the history they carry. We are merely their temporary custodians." He paused, looking at her with an unexpected kindness that touched her deeply. "You seem to appreciate them greatly. Do you have a favorite?" Martha felt a pang of profound relief, a warmth spreading through her chilled heart. Here, finally, was a kindred spirit, a soul who understood the true essence of sterling gems. The Georgian pieces, the way they capture grief with such delicate artistry. It's a testament to human resilience, to finding beauty even in sorrow. Elias nodded thoughtfully, a knowing look in his eyes. "Such wisdom. I find myself lost in their narratives often. It's a privilege to be entrusted with their care, to share their stories with others." He then glanced at his watch, a simple, functional timepiece, far from the ostentatious models Alastair favored. "It's past lunchtime. I was just about to have my own humble meal. Would you care to join me? I have an extra sandwich and some tea. It's nothing fancy, I'm afraid, just a cheese and pickle, but it's filling." The offer, so simple, so unadorned, struck Octavia with the force of a physical blow, a sudden, emotional torrent. Her grandchildren, surrounded by unimaginable wealth, had offered her nothing but scorn and a desire to dispose of her. This quiet, unassuming archivist, earning a modest salary, offered a shared meal, a moment of companionship, and genuine human warmth, seeing her as a person in need, not a burden. He saw her as an equal, a fellow human being, not a problem. Martha felt a lump form in her throat, tears stinging her eyes. "That would be most kind, Elias. Thank you." Her voice was thick with suppressed emotion. They sat on a small, worn bench in a quiet corner of the museum, surrounded by centuries of history, a silent testament to enduring values. Elias shared his simple sandwich and a thermos of tea. He spoke not of money or status, but of the museum's latest acquisitions, of the painstaking process of cataloging ancient artifacts, of the joy he found in uncovering a forgotten detail about a piece. He spoke of his own life, a quiet existence dedicated to his passion, acknowledging his struggles but never complaining. He inquired about Martha's well-being, listened attentively to her vague, fabricated answers, and offered words of comfort, unaware he was comforting the very woman who owned the empire that employed him. He spoke of the importance of preserving beauty, of the quiet dignity of work done with love. "It's a difficult world out there, isn't it?" Elias mused, taking a sip of his tea, his gaze sweeping over the silent exhibits. "Especially for those without much. But I've always believed that kindness, however small, can make the biggest difference. It's like a quiet light in the darkness, a beacon for others." Octavia, disguised as Martha, looked at this humble man, truly seeing him for the first time beyond his professional capacity. His words resonated with a profound truth that her grandchildren had long forgotten, if they had ever known it. Elias, with his simple sandwich and his genuine compassion, had passed her test with flying colors, not by design, but by the sheer, unadulterated goodness of his character. The decision that had been brewing within Octavia's heart now solidified into an unshakable resolve. She knew exactly who deserved her legacy, who would protect its soul. Over the next few days, Martha continued her observations, each interaction a further confirmation of her decision. She witnessed Alastair openly berating a junior assistant for a minor mistake, threatening their job security with a casual wave of his hand, a chilling display of arbitrary power. She saw Bronwyn dismiss an elderly groundskeeper who had served the estate for 40 years, deeming him too slow and suggesting he be replaced by a younger, cheaper alternative, a cold disregard for loyalty and dedication. Their callousness knew no bounds. They were fixated on the impending inheritance, already spending it in their minds, their conversations rife with schemes to maximize profit and minimize what they perceived as extraneous costs, including human decency. They spoke of their grandmother, the real Octavia, with a chilling detachment, lamenting her continued existence as a delay to their ambitions, a temporary inconvenience before their true lives could begin. The poor relative was just another annoyance, a persistent shadow to be ignored or dispatched, a reminder of their perceived burden. In stark contrast, Elias, on another occasion, was seen quietly assisting Anu, visibly overwhelmed in turn, patiently explaining a complex cataloging system without a hint of condescension, his voice soft and encouraging. He offered a genuine smile to the cleaning staff, acknowledged their hard work with a nod of respect, and even shared a joke with the security guard, treating everyone with an inherent dignity. He continued to offer Martha small courtesies, a hot cup of tea on a cold day, a shared newspaper article he thought she might enjoy, a quiet word of encouragement, an inquiry about her comfort. He saw her, truly saw her, even in her disguise, as a person worthy of respect and kindness, a fellow human being navigating the complexities of life. The chasm between the two sets of individuals was vast and absolute, a gulf of character that could not be bridged. Octavia had found her answer, her chosen successor. The atmosphere in the grand ballroom was electric, charged with a mixture of anticipation and barely concealed avarice, a predator's hunger for the kill. This was the moment, the official reading of Octavia Sterling's will, the culmination of decades of expectation. The family, a constellation of distant relatives, associates, and curious onlookers, had gathered, their faces a carefully constructed mask of solemnity, yet their eyes betrayed a keen, almost predatory, interest in the proceedings. Alastair and Bronwyn occupied the front row, their posture radiating an almost palpable smugness, a quiet certainty of their impending triumph. They had already divided the fortune in their minds, down to the last antique spoon, the last share of sterling gems. Their grandmother, they believed, was a mere breath away from her final farewell, safely ensconced in her sickbed, far from this momentous occasion, a mere formality. The poor relative, Martha, had been conspicuously absent for the last few days, a small mercy they were grateful for, one less inconvenience. Mr. Henderson, the family lawyer, stood at the podium, his voice grave as he began to read the formal preamble, a dry, legalistic drone that grated on the eager ears of the heirs. Alistair stifled a yawn, while Bronwyn checked her watch, her finger tapping impatiently, eager for the main event, the grand unveiling of their inherited kingdom. "And now," Mr. Henderson announced, his eyes sweeping across the room, a subtle, almost imperceptible tremor in his voice, "I have been instructed by Mrs. Sterling to make a final, personal announcement before proceeding with the official dissolution of the estate and the distribution of assets." Just then, a ripple of whispers began near the main entrance, a rising tide of murmurs. The heavy oak doors, which had been closed, swung open with dramatic flair, a slow, deliberate movement that commanded all attention. All heads turned, a collective gasp sweeping through the room, quickly followed by stunned silence. Standing framed in the doorway, bathed in the soft, ethereal glow of the crystal chandeliers, was Octavia Sterling. But this was not the frail, fading matriarch they had envisioned, the almost spectral figure they had dismissed as being on her deathbed. She stood tall and majestic, a regal figure in a gown of deep emerald silk, its fabric shimmering with an inner light, reflecting the strength that radiated from her. Diamonds glittered at her throat and wrists, catching the light like frozen stars, accentuating her power. Her silver hair, impeccably styled, framed a face that was not only vibrant but radiated an almost formidable power, a steely resolve that pierced through the opulent air. Her eyes, sharp and clear, held a glint of steel, a fire that burned with an unyielding purpose. Alistair's face drained of all color, turning ashen, his mouth agape, a silent scream of disbelief. Bronwyn, for once, was utterly speechless, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a cry of disbelief, her carefully constructed composure shattered. They stared, aghast, as their grandmother, whom they had believed to be on her deathbed, walked slowly, deliberately, into the room, her every step a testament to her undeniable presence, her absolute command. The air crackled with a palpable tension. Octavia reached the podium, taking her place beside a visibly uncomfortable Mr. Henderson, who seemed to shrink in her formidable presence. She cast a chilling gaze over her stunned audience, her eyes pausing for a significant, piercing moment on Alistair and Bronwyn, allowing the full weight of her scrutiny to settle upon them. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice resonating with an authority that left no room for doubt or argument, each word clear and ringing. "I see I've managed to surprise a few of you. Especially my dear grandchildren, Alistair and Bronwyn, who, I gather, had already begun allocating my fortune among themselves." A faint, almost imperceptible tremor of satisfaction ran through her. Alistair finally found his voice, a desperate, strangled whisper, laced with a pathetic attempt at feigned concern. "Grandmother! This is incredible. A miracle. We thought you were. We were so worried. We prayed for your recovery." He attempted a fumbling step forward, a look of forced concern plastered on his face, a desperate plea for clemency. Bronwyn, recovering her composure slightly, though still pale, forced a shaky laugh, her voice brittle. "Oh, grandmother, you are simply marvelous. Playing such a trick on us. But we're so relieved to see you well. You truly had us fooled. What a wonderful surprise." Her eyes darted nervously, trying to gauge the situation, to understand how this formidable woman could possibly be the same frail figure they had so recently spurned, the Martha they had so easily dismissed. Octavia's smile was cold, devoid of warmth, like a winter sun. "Fooled? Oh, you were indeed fooled, my dears. But not in the way you imagine. You see, the terminal illness, the frailty, the impending demise, that was all an act. A meticulously orchestrated deception designed to reveal the true character of those around me. Especially those closest to me." Her words sliced through their flimsy excuses, leaving them exposed. A collective murmur swept through the room, a confused wave of realization. Whispers broke out, quickly quelled by Octavia's unwavering gaze, which silenced all dissent. "For weeks," she continued, her voice gaining a steely edge, each word sharper than the last, "I lived among you, not as Octavia Sterling, the matriarch, the owner of this empire, but as Martha, a distant, impoverished relative. A woman who, to your eyes, had nothing to offer, and everything to demand. A burden, a nuisance, an embarrassment. Her words hung in the air, a damning indictment. Alistair and Bronwyn stiffened, their faces now registering not just shock, but dawning horror, a chilling recognition flickering in their eyes, the memory of the hunched figure, the faded clothes, the mothball smell, the casual cruelty of their remarks. I watched you, Alistair. Octavia's voice was a whip, lashing out at her grandson, each word a physical blow, as you openly discussed liquidating the very artifacts that represent the soul of sterling gems, to fund your frivolous desires, your private jets and lavish parties. I heard you, Bronwyn, lamenting my continued existence as a delay to your inheritance, plotting to cast me aside like an inconvenient piece of refuse, suggesting I be relegated to some distant facility because my presence was unseemly. The color drained from their faces entirely. They opened their mouths, desperate to speak, to deny, to explain, to plead for mercy, but no words came out. Their carefully constructed masks had not just fallen, they had shattered into irreparable fragments, revealing the ugly truth beneath. You saw a frail, old woman, apparently on the brink of death, and your only thought was how to rid yourselves of her as quickly and cheaply as possible. You offered me no kindness, no comfort, no empathy. Only scorn, dismissal, and thinly veiled contempt. You deemed me worthless because I no longer appeared to have material value in your eyes. Octavia paused, letting the crushing weight of her words settle upon them, a heavy blanket of judgment. Then, her gaze softened, though her voice remained resolute, touched with a quiet dignity. But it was not all darkness. In that disguise, I also encountered true goodness, a kindness untainted by expectation or greed, a beacon in the gloom. I met Elias Thorne, our senior archivist. Her eyes sought him out in the crowd, a silent acknowledgement. Elias, who had been standing humbly at the back, now looked utterly bewildered, his face a mixture of surprise and utter confusion, unable to comprehend his sudden prominence. Elias, a man of humble means, who saw an old woman, a stranger, and offered her not just a humble meal, but genuine warmth, conversation, and respect. He listened to her, spoke to her with dignity, and treated her as a fellow human being, simply because it was the right thing to do. He saw worth where others saw only burden. He illuminated the true meaning of character, a quality my own blood seems to have entirely forgotten. The room was utterly silent, every eye fixed on the unfolding drama, the devastating judgment. Alistair and Bronwyn stood frozen, their faces etched with a ghastly mixture of fear and growing despair as they began to comprehend the devastating implications of Octavia's words. The climax was not just a reveal, it was a judgment, swift and unforgiving, a final reckoning. The silence that followed Octavia's revelation was heavy, broken only by the sharp, ragged breaths of Alistair and Bronwyn, like gasps from drowning swimmers. The faces of the assembled family members ranged from shock to thinly veiled satisfaction, depending on their own positions within the sterling hierarchy. A few distant cousins, long overlooked, exchanged knowing glances, a subtle vindication in their eyes. Mr. Henderson, having regained his composure, cleared his throat, a silent signal that the formal proceedings, now imbued with a new, terrifying significance, would continue. He seemed to brace himself, knowing the seismic shift about to occur. Octavia turned her gaze from her grandchildren, her expression now one of cold, unwavering resolve, a steel curtain falling between them. Mr. Henderson, if you would be so kind as to proceed with the revised will. The one I executed earlier this morning. Her voice was quiet, but it resonated with an unassailable authority. Alistair stumbled forward, his voice hoarse, a desperate croak. Revised will? Grandmother, you can't. We are your blood. Your rightful heirs. This is outrageous. A trick. You can't do this. His privileged world was collapsing around him. Bronwyn, tears streaming down her face, echoed his desperation, her composure completely gone. Yes. You're just angry. This is a cruel joke. We didn't know it was you. We We would have treated you differently, grandmother, truly. Her words, however, rang hollow, poisoned by the memory of her earlier callousness, a bitter, ironic echo. She reached for Alistair's hand, seeking comfort in their shared downfall. Octavia merely raised a hand, silencing them with a gesture of absolute finality, a simple, powerful movement. Ignorance, my dears, is no excuse for cruelty. Your actions were a reflection of your character, not of my disguise. And it is character, not bloodline, that dictates worthiness in my eyes. Her words were an iron gate, closing off any possibility of appeal. Mr. Henderson began to read, his voice devoid of emotion, the legalistic terms carrying the weight of a death sentence for Alistair and Bronwyn, each clause a nail in their coffin. I, Octavia Sterling, being of sound mind and body, hereby revoke all previous wills and codicils. To my grandchildren, Alistair Sterling and Bronwyn Sterling, for their demonstrated lack of empathy, their profound materialism, and their open contempt for the values upon which the Sterling Empire was built, I bequeath nothing. No real estate, no shares in Sterling gems, no liquid assets, and no access to any trust funds established on their behalf. Their current residences, vehicles, and all associated privileges provided by Sterling gems are to be immediately revoked. They are to vacate the Sterling properties within 24 hours. Alistair let out a strangled cry of disbelief, a guttural sound of utter desolation. Nothing? You can't. This is impossible. We'll sue. We'll fight this in court. This is an injustice. He looked around, desperate for an ally, but found only averted gazes. Bronwyn collapsed onto a nearby chair, sobbing openly, a picture of utter devastation, her carefully coiffed hair disheveled. My God, everything? We'll have nothing? What will become of us? Her laments were self-pitying, devoid of remorse for their actions. The lawyer continued, his voice unwavering, delivering the final blows. Furthermore, their names are to be removed from all future executive positions within Sterling Gems. They are henceforth disassociated from the company in any official capacity. The words sealed their fate, severing them completely from the source of their past identity and wealth. The news spread like wildfire through the room, then beyond, through the entire social network of the elite. Whispers turned into shocked exclamations, then into a collective buzz of schadenfreude and awe. The Sterling heirs, for generations accustomed to an unbroken line of inherited wealth, were now stripped bare, cast out. Alistair and Bronwyn's downfall was swift and brutal. Within hours, their credit cards were frozen, their lavish expenditures abruptly halted. The keys to their luxury vehicles, company-owned, were confiscated. Their access to the sprawling Sterling properties was denied, the gates they had always passed through now barred. They were left with only the clothes on their backs and the few personal items they could hastily grab. The public humiliation was immense. News of the dramatic disinheritance spread through the elite circles like a virulent disease, a scandal that overshadowed all others. Their friends vanished, their social invitations ceased, and the very doors that had once opened for them now slammed shut with resounding finality. They were forced to confront a reality they had never imagined, a life without privilege, without the endless flow of Sterling money. Their greed had consumed them, and now, they were left with only the ashes of their former lives, forced to scramble for survival in a world they had always considered beneath them. The irony was a bitter, pervasive taste in their mouths, a perpetual reminder of their folly. Then, Mr. Henderson turned his attention to Elias. The archivist, still reeling from being mentioned by Octavia, looked utterly bewildered, clutching his humble, worn journal tighter. And now, the lawyer stated, his voice carrying a note of profound, albeit subtle, gravitas, to Elias Thorne, for his unwavering dedication to the true spirit of Sterling Gems, for his profound respect for its history, and for demonstrating unparalleled kindness and compassion to a stranger in need, Mrs. Sterling has made the following provisions. Elias's eyes widened, a flicker of fear mixed with disbelief crossing his face. He had expected, at most, a commendation, perhaps a small bonus for his years of quiet service. Never this. Elias Thorne is hereby appointed the director of the Sterling Gems Private Museum, with a substantial endowment to ensure its continued preservation and growth, under his absolute discretion. He is to receive a generous annual salary, commensurate with his new position, along with a significant portion of shares in Sterling Gems, ensuring his financial security for life. Elias gasped, his hand flying to his mouth, a choked sob escaping his lips. Tears welled in his eyes, not of sorrow, but of overwhelming gratitude and shock, his humble nature struggling to process such an immense gift. He, a man who had dedicated his life to the quiet pursuit of history, a man who had never sought wealth or power, was suddenly bestowed with both. Furthermore, Mr. Henderson continued, as if dropping a series of increasingly astonishing bombs, Mrs. Sterling has bequeathed to Elias Thorne the deed to the historic Sterling Cottage, a charming, secluded property on the estate grounds, to serve as his new residence. This property is to be fully renovated and maintained at the company's expense, ensuring his comfort and security. Elias swayed slightly, his legs threatening to give way beneath him. He had spent his entire life in a modest, rented apartment, dreaming of a small garden, a quiet place to read and contemplate. Now, a beautiful home, financial freedom, and the stewardship of the very museum he adored, it was beyond his wildest dreams, a profound validation of his life's work. He looked at Octavia, his eyes brimming with unshed tears, a silent testament to his profound appreciation, his deep humility. Octavia gave him a gentle, approving nod, a rare, soft smile gracing her lips. Elias, the quiet archivist, had not just received wealth, he had received a legacy, a chance to pour his passion into the very heart of the Sterling Empire, ensuring its true values would endure. He was the worthy successor, not of blood, but of spirit, a true custodian of history and integrity. Months later, the grand Sterling estate, once a symbol of superficial opulence, hummed with a different kind of energy. Octavia Sterling, now truly retired from the day-to-day operations, found a profound peace in her golden years, a tranquility earned through a life of purpose and a decisive final act. She often visited the Sterling Gems Private Museum, not as its owner, but as a quiet observer, a patron of its renewed spirit, enjoying the quiet hum of activity and the reverence for history that now permeated its walls. Elias Thorne, now the museum's esteemed director, moved through its hallowed halls with a quiet authority and an unwavering passion. He had flourished in his new role, his inherent kindness and meticulous dedication amplified by the resources now at his disposal. He had initiated new conservation projects, bringing fragile artifacts back to their former glory, expanded educational programs that brought history to life for new generations, and even acquired rare artifacts that Octavia herself had long coveted, ensuring the museum's legacy for generations to come. The Sterling Cottage, his new home, was a haven of tranquility, its gardens blooming under his gentle care, a sanctuary reflecting his inner peace. He remained humble, despite his newfound wealth, often sharing his knowledge and enthusiasm with visitors and staff alike, embodying the very values of integrity and appreciation that Octavia had sought to preserve. He was a living testament to the idea that true worth lay not in inherited privilege, but in the quiet nobility of one's actions, a testament to character. Alastair and Bronwyn, on the other hand, had vanished from the glittering circles they once inhabited. Stripped of their inherited wealth, they struggled to adapt to a life of normalcy, a life where their charm and connections held no currency, where their names meant nothing without the sterling fortune attached. Rumors occasionally surfaced, whispered among their former peers, Alastair, attempting to start a dubious online venture that quickly failed due to his lack of business acumen and disdain for hard work. Bronwyn, reduced to selling her last few designer handbags and pieces of costume jewelry to make rent, her pride shattered. They were forced to confront the harsh reality that their lavish lifestyles had been entirely predicated on their grandmother's fortune, and without it, they possessed no true skills, no genuine character, and no lasting connections. Their fall was a cautionary tale whispered in the elite echelons, a stark reminder that entitlement, unchecked, leads only to ruin. They were left to navigate a world they had once scorned, burdened by the weight of their past cruelties and the bitter taste of their own worthlessness, a punishment far more insidious than any prison cell. Octavia, watching Elias thrive, felt a deep sense of contentment, a profound peace settling over her. She had not only secured the future of Sterling Gems, but she had also ensured that its soul, its true legacy, would be carried forward by someone truly deserving, someone who valued history and humanity over mere profit. She had gambled much, risking her reputation and her own emotional well-being, but she had won a victory far more profound than any financial gain. She had proven that while blood may bind, it is character that truly defines, and kindness that ultimately endures, shining brightest in the darkest hours. The grand, intricate tapestry of life often hides its most profound lessons in the shadows, revealing the true colors of individuals when the light of prosperity dims. For it is in the dark, when all pretense is stripped away, that one's character is truly revealed. And as Octavia Sterling had so dramatically proven, true worth is not measured in gold or lineage, but in the quiet, unassuming grace of a kind heart, a grace that, in the end, will always find its just and rightful reward. If you were captivated by Octavia's ingenious plan and the shocking twist of fate in this story, you'll find many more tales of justice, transformation, and unexpected reversals of fortune right here on our channel. Don't miss out on our next gripping narrative. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell so you're always the first to know when a new story drops. Now, we'd love to hear your thoughts. What did you think of Octavia's elaborate test? Do you believe Alistair and Bronwyn deserved to lose everything, or was Octavia's punishment too harsh? And what about Elias? Do you think he was the perfect choice to carry on the Sterling legacy? Share your comments and opinions below. We read every one of them.